Crash issue 18 was the July 1985 issue. The cover art, based on the game Dunder released this month, was considered controversial and caused some shops to place it on the top shelf of the magazine racks. There were 4 Crash smashes this month, so let's get on to the games. There are 2 games in 10th place this month with a score of 78%. The first is Wenderbender, published by Ranks High. This is a remake of the blockbuster game from issue 8. After release of that game, it became apparent that it hadn't been officially licensed, so this game is a remake with some changes to not infringe copyright. Crash gave this a fairly brief review and found that the new layout of the main screen was a great improvement over the old. They liked the addition of extra question tapes to give the game longevity. They considered Wenderbender probably the best general knowledge quiz game on the market. They found it interesting, entertaining and well produced and gave the game a score of 78%. As it's fundamentally the same game as that reviewed in issue 8, the sound is still pretty bad, although this time the intro music is new rather than butchering the original TV theme. The main playing area is slightly nice to look at than the original game, but the game itself is essentially the same. This one doesn't have the nostalgic connection with the TV show, and Maxon's version reviewed in issue 13 is still slightly better. Also in 10th place is Ashkaran, released by Mirrorsoft and written by Textgate Computers Limited. This is a text adventure with a fairly typical fantasy setting and plot, with you having to rescue a princess from an evil wizard. Crash felt that the appeal of this game would be very broad due to its open structure, which can be quickly and easily explored even by the most novice of adventurers. They found that its endearing storyline set within a most impressive and believable castle ensured a challenge that everyone would find interesting and rewarding. They gave this game an overall score of 8 out of 10, and taking the average scores of a percentage, gave this 78%. The graphics, although blocky, are certainly colourful and have a distinctive style to them. The game has a number of novel features for text adventures of the time. The first is a higher degree of randomness than the money adventures, with adversaries turning up at different times and in different places on each playthrough. You can also opt to start the game with objects in random locations, which further adds to the challenge. Partway through the game you encounter a wizard who casts a spell that reverses all of your actions, so directions are inverted and the get and drop commands are swapped. Not a game if you don't like text adventures, but for fans of the genre, this does offer something new in terms of gameplay despite the cliched fantasy setting. There are also 2 games in 8th place with 79%. The first is Super Pipeline 2, released by Task Set Software. This is a fast-paced arcade game with you taking the role of a workman who has to repair a pipe whilst many adversaries try to stop you. This was a conversion of a Commodore 64 game, but Crash felt that the C64 version looked better, although enjoying the animation and colourful graphics. They found it tough, with some of the pipes hard to get onto. Nevertheless, they found it an addictive and playable game. They gave it an overall score of 79%. I'm not overly keen on this game. It looks like it should be good fun, but the playing area is just too confusing. When you lose life, it's not always entirely obvious why. The animation is smooth enough and the sound is effective, but I just didn't find the game fun enough to want to play again. Also in 8th place is The Rocky Horror Show, published by CRL. This is an arcade adventure based on the musical and film of the same name. In this game you're able to take the role of Brad or Janet, your mission being to find the pieces of the Medusa machine in order to rescue your significant other. Crash described this as an appealing game to play on the whole. They liked the animation and the way in which the characters moved around of their own free will. However, they did notice that some bugs were still present in the game. They drew comparisons between the style of this game and that of Gargoyle's Turn Our Nog. They found the game playable, but not that addictive, but nevertheless gave it an overall score of 79%. The version of the Time Warp tune played on the Spectrum's beeper is just appalling, but the game itself is reasonable, with the mansion being exceptionally well detailed and colour clash avoided by making each room monochrome but a different colour. The game feels quite slow-paced, nevertheless looks to be a good arcade adventure that would appeal even to those that aren't familiar with the film or musical version. In 7th place with 82% is Glass from Quicksilver. In this game you fly across a simulation of the surface of the planet Hygon, shooting at aliens on some levels and flying across a graveyard, avoiding large gravestones on others. Crash were impressed by the smooth and delightful standard of the graphics. However, they didn't feel there was much of a game to it, more a series of nice effects. One reviewer found it addictive and playable, but another found the price to be a little steep. This game's okay, it certainly uses colour well and the graphics are smooth. The problem is that by this point other games have done the 3D first-person space shooter so much better. The second round, inspired by 3D Death Chase, is harder and doesn't quite have the addictiveness of that game. Not a bad game, but not one I'd be going out of my way to play. In 6th place with a score of 83% we have Archon from Ariolasoft. Archon is a board-based strategy game with you taking the role of either good or evil and playing against the computer or another player. Crash said that although looking similar to chess, it's nothing like it and was the most addictive strategy game that they had played. However, they felt the graphics could have been better, and at £11 the price was a bit steep. This game seems to be somewhat inspired by the traditional game of chess and somewhat similar to Chaos, reviewed in issue 16. I haven't really played the game enough to get an idea of how well it stands up as a strategy game. However, the graphics are pretty awful. In the manual there's a Q&A section, one of the questions being what to do about the icons being hard to tell apart on a TV set. The answer given is to buy a new monitor. Unfortunately, they don't look any better on a high resolution display. Maybe worth a play though if you like strategy games. In 5th place with 86% we have Quackshot, released by Sparklers, a rebrand of Creative Sparks. In this game you play the role of a night watchman at the Acme Clockwork toy factory. The toys have come alive and are trying to kill you. You must shoot them and make your way to the exit of each level. Crash described Quackshot as one of the best maze games they'd seen over the past few months, being wacky and having so much life to it. They liked the way the game built up in difficulty, found it fun to play, and very addictive. The fact that you can only shoot horizontally makes this game quite challenging at first. Although it reminded me somewhat of Cavalon from issue 7, this is a better game, and it's just hard enough that it seems beatable, which makes it a game that you want to have just one more go at. Not an all-time classic, but quite fun for a few goes. In 4th place with a score of 90% is Herberts Dummy Run from Microgen. This is the 4th game in the Wally Week series, and a follow-up to Everyone's a Wally from issue 14. In this you play Wally's son Herbert, who is lost in a department store and has to find his parents before the time runs out. Crash had mixed feelings about this game, on the one hand feeling that Microgen may be repeating the formula too often, but on the other hand they liked the colour, the large and detailed graphics, and found the game fun and very addictive. One reviewer felt that the price tag of £9.95 was a little steep. They concluded that overall this was another winner for Microgen and gave it a crash smash. I was a big fan of the first 3 Wally Week games back in the day, but I had not played Herbert's Dummy Run until now. This one bears quite a resemblance to Pyjamarama. It doesn't quite have the charm of that game and feels slightly slower. Probably worth a play if you like this style of arcade adventure, but I just found it slightly disappointing as a sequel. In 3rd place, with a score of 91%, was Cauldron from Palace Software. In this game you take the role of a witch and have to fly on your broomstick around the landscape, collect keys, and enter caverns to find spell ingredients, to defeat a pumpkin and win the coveted golden broomstick. One Crash reviewer had nothing but praise for this game, finding the graphic detail to be marvellous, and the colour to be exceptionally well used. A couple of the reviewers didn't like the way the screen moved in pages rather than being smoothly scrolling, but found it a reasonable compromise for the Spectrum's capabilities. They summarised it as a large, engaging and difficult game, finding it playable and fairly addictive. It's not an easy game, but it's a game that creates just the right atmosphere with its graphics, and it's a good combination of arcade action with exploration of the landscape. Good fun, and it was certainly worthy of a Crash smash. In 2nd place with a score of 94% is Dynamite Dan from Mirrorsoft. In this game you take the role of Dan and have to find 8 sticks of dynamite, blow a safe and steal plans for a secret weapon. Crash recognised the comparisons with Jet Set Willy but found the graphics much better, more detailed, more colourful and more lively. They found it a highly playable, fun and addictive game, as well as being one of the most tuneful games they'd encountered. Although acknowledging that platform games were regarded as out of fashion in some circles, they felt that this game showed that there was still life in the old genre. Unsurprisingly it was given a Crash smash. An incredibly hard game in the Jet Set Willy and Technician Ted style, but one that nevertheless does the exploratory collection platform game well. Smoothly animated original graphics, a nice rendition of Turkish Rondo on the main menu and good sound throughout, it's one of the highlights of this genre and well worth a play. In 1st place this month with a score of 97% is Dunder from Gargoyle Games. Dunder is a follow-up to Turn Our Nog, reviewed in issue 11. You again take the role of Cuchulainn, exploring the city of Dunder. Your quest is to rescue your faithful charioteer Loig from the evil sorceress Scar. Crash didn't think it was possible to improve on Turn Our Nog, but found that with this game, the Gargoyle had pulled it off. They were amazed by the sheer quality of the graphics, among the best they'd ever seen. Although finding it hard to get into, they found the game totally addictive and utterly playable, and were sure it'd be a hit. They rated this as a strong contender for Game of the Year, gave the graphics 96% and addictive qualities 97%. Even at £9.95 the game was still given a value for money rating of 94%. The overall score at 97% was the highest given in Crash at this point, and unsurprisingly they gave this a Crash smash. I can see why some people criticise this as being a bit of a walking simulator. There's certainly a lot of walking around the streets of the city in this game. Nevertheless, I just loved the feel and the world building. The problems were hard, but the game was fun to map and fun to play through with a walkthrough. In gameplay it was exactly the same as Turn Our Nog and had the same protagonist. Nevertheless, the atmosphere of the medieval city was captured well in this game, and if you're a fan of slower paced and more exploratory games, this is still a classic of the genre. The first special mention this month is The Bulge by Lothlorien. As is typical for strategy games, The Bulge didn't get a percentage rating, so it was difficult to place in the top 10, although the game did get a Crash smash. This is a simulation of the World War II Battle of the Bulge, playable by either 2 players or 1 player against the computer. Crash described the Bulge as the biggest strategy game they'd seen, with incredibly fast responses, cursor movement and scrolling. They found it very user-friendly to play and liked the facility to change the colours. They described it as addictive and as a game with overwhelming scope and power. They gave it a Crash smash. I can't say that I was overexcited by the Bulge. The graphics just seemed blocky, and it's very easy for your cursor to overshoot the square you wanted, but maybe you want to have a look at if you're keen on strategy games. The next special mention is Board of the Rings, written by Delta Force Software and originally released by Silversoft. This is a parody of the Tolkien novel The Lord of the Rings, with you taking the role of Frodo Baggins with a mission to destroy the Ring of Power that's come into your possession from your Uncle Bimbo. Like the original book, this was a game of 3 parts. Crash found that the game had been dutifully constructed and carefully finished. They liked the nice redefined character set but didn't find the graphics to be especially good. They gave this an overall score of 7.5 out of 10. Lord of the Rings was a game that I saw in the shop when it came out and just had to buy it based on the strength of the cover and description. I was a massive Lord of the Rings fan, and the spoof nature appealed to my teenage sense of humour. Fergus McNeil of Deltafall was a master of the spoof, and although playing the game now it becomes apparent that there isn't much depth to the problem solving, it still puts a smile on my face. As a 3-parter, there's plenty of game for the price. If you like Lord of the Rings and still have an adolescent sense of humour, it's definitely one to play. My last special mention this month is Subsk, released by Firebird. This is a text adventure set on a submarine. You play a newspaper reporter who remains alone on the submarine after the crew have been taken by enemies boarding. Your mission is to find the telex room and send a message that will get you rescued. Crash felt that the colour scheme didn't work particularly well on a colour television, but thought that for the asking price of £2.50 the game wasn't bad at all. They found the game logic to be thin in some places and suspect in others, but found the balance between getting somewhere and solving problems was about right. They found the graphics to be relatively simple, but gave the game a general rating of quite good and a score of 7.5 out of 10. For some reason, the screenshot included in the magazine was not of the ZX Spectrum version of the game. This game has unique graphical style, with pictures constructed from user-defined graphics that look a bit odd to start with. Yet where this game shines is in its originality. Set on a modern submarine, this is as far away from the ubiquitous fantasy genre as you could get. The problems are all challenging yet satisfying to solve, and the sense of claustrophobia on the submarine is created well. A game I played many times back in the day, and one I think should have scored slightly higher. If you have enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to see more videos about retro games from Norlogic Retro.